Watch this.
A bus line is in limbo for a Treasure Valley city, where its leaders fear there aren't enough riders to make it worth it to foot the bill. But how will the people relying on that service get around? As for getting around, more guardrails are coming for e-bikes, this time in Garden City. Coming up, a look at what ordinance will keep them off the street. It's a friendship north of the border, built on trust and agriculture. Why Idahoans are making the trip to Canada for a better trade future. Well, Nampa is laying out its budget, and what currently isn't included in it, funding for Valley Regional Transit, or VRT for short. This comes after months of debate over bus routes, on-demand rides, or federal grants covering the cost. Now, if you remember back in May, the city worked with Uber to try and find a solution for transportation services for its community. Then Uber backed out. VRT then went back to the drawing board and rerouted Route 40 out of Nampa. They also changed how the agency provides on-demand services. It was all in the effort to meet a tighter city budget. Nampa is now left with two options: renew a contract with VRT or discontinue public transportation services. Our Cooper Morgan explains.
For more than 2 decades, buses have been a quiet lifeline in Nampa, supplied by Elaine Clegg and her crew.
Well, it means not for us, and that's probably the hardest part for me. Our mission is to serve their residents, their people.
But now it's en route that would leave bus stops like this one empty for good.
If it goes through in a final vote, will be that there will be no public transportation service in Nampa.
It's a process that starts with a budget meeting in Nampa, where city leaders face tough financial decisions, in part due to the fact that
Idaho doesn't have any dedicated funding for transit.
with no dedicated state or local funding for public transit, council members weighed 3 options: keep both Route 42 and on-demand service, keep only on-demand service, or cut city funding for transit altogether.
Motion carries
4-2.
4-2.
The council voted to completely cut funding for VRT. Part of the debate centered on federal transportation grants that are being used for other projects. Some council members questioned whether keeping Route 42 just to preserve eligibility for grants that rely on bus infrastructure was worth the cost.
Chasing grant dollars for, as we heard today, for a project that is not even a priority in the top 10 for the city right now.
Others said the service itself was too important to lose, pointing to the people they see riding every day.
I live right by CWI. I see more ridership probably than anybody here. I know it's not a ton and what we all would love to see.
One of the biggest disagreements came down to how many people actually depend on the system.
Maybe adding up to 17,000 rides, but 300 unique individuals is difficult.
For riders, that 300 people number doesn't feel small at all.
Well over 1,000 use it regularly. We know there are other people that use it occasionally. Those are rides that people take almost every day.
Clegg says last year alone, Valley Regional Transit provided more than 30,000 rides in Nampa, and now
Ultimately, this region will be much better served if we can figure out a way to provide a complete transportation system. Right now, I think our system is very fragile. We have driving, and that's really about it.
Workshop allows council to determine a direction they want to go with for the budget, and based on action items the council took yesterday, a new budget will start to be drafted and be available for people to view on August 3rd, which then 2 weeks before the public hearing on the budget at the August 17th council meeting, where a final vote on the budget is also anticipated. But those are the next steps really in this process. So nothing final quite yet, but first steps definitely towards getting rid of that budget.
Probably the closest at this point from them saying, hey, yeah, we're not going to do this anymore. But again, you have your chance to speak at this public comment, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's really what they want. They want the public to kind of come in and voice their concerns. And Valley Regional Transit also is going to gather some of those comments themselves and bring it to the council to show just how much this means to some people in Nampa.
It's been back and forth for quite some time, so we'll see how it ends up playing out for the budget, really. Yeah.
Tight times.
Tight times. We see it everywhere. All right, Coop, thanks. Well, another city is now regulating e-bikes. Garden City just passed an emergency ordinance to keep high-speed e-motorcycles and high-speed e-scooters off of the streets unless they're licensed and insured. This ordinance also keeps them out of parks and off of the greenbelt. Justin Cord joins us now to explain. Justin, what do they mean when they say high speed?
Well, Hunter, that is a great question, and I'm not just saying that because I wrote it. The point of this ordinance is to define these high-speed e-bikes and e-scooters and create regulations specifically for them. So to finally answer that great question from Hunter, Garden City now defines a high-speed e-motorbike as anything with more than 750 watts that can go more than 28 miles an hour. It defines a high-speed e-scooter as anything with more than 300 watts that can go more than 15 miles an hour. These are only allowed on streets if they are titled and insured, like any other motorized vehicle. And just like any other motorized vehicle, they're not allowed on the greenbelt, in crosswalks, in bike lanes, and in parks. This is all very similar to Boise's new ordinance. City Council members said at this week's meeting, it's all about safety.
We've recently seen injuries, thankfully not in our jurisdiction per se that I'm aware of, but I'm aware of a person that lost their life. And so these ordinances are, I think there's a great deal of urgency to this.
And because of that urgency, they made it an emergency ordinance, putting it into effect immediately. So these are the rules right now. If you break them, it's an infraction, not a crime, so you won't have to go to trial for all this, but you could pay as much as $300 plus court costs. The mayor also talked about the fact that they'll probably have to tweak this ordinance in a year or two as technology advances.
I do just have a gut feeling that probably every year technology evolves, it changes. And so probably once a year, we might need to fine tune the definitions of technology. So for instance, I haven't seen a hoverboard on the greenbelt in a long time. I live on the greenbelt, and so I can kind of see what the latest technology is. And hoverboards were really popular about 2 years ago, and I just haven't seen one in a while, right? I've seen a unicycle, but it's always the same guy, right? And I've seen one.
So for that unicyclist, here's that attention you ordered. Also, stay weird, friend.
You got me off guard there for a second. I like that. You never know, though. It's true, because I keep seeing e-bikes get faster. I mean, there was the Segways, the Segway trend for a while.
Right. And again, these are not necessarily e-bicycles.
Right.
These are more like e-motorcycles is what they're talking about. Yeah.
Okay, so Garden City is seeming to figure out how to regulate a little bit of this, but what about Boise? Is there, you've got a creative idea for Boise? Is there
Hunter, that is just another brilliant question. You're full of them. And as Hunter just described if you described if you got a lot of ideas, a lot of suggestions, well, the city of Boise is opening applications for 2 people to join Boise's new e-mobility task force. Oh. That task force will help develop educational outreach and e-mobility policy. Exciting.
I know we have some viewers that are probably going to do that.
Yes, that's right.
They have some opinions.
Make your text and then make your application.
Yeah, I like that. All right, Justin, thank you. All right, now to the 411 on the 208. Crews are making progress on the Claremont fire that's burning in the Boise foothills. So far, it's burned more than 6,800 acres, but firefighters have flames 70% under control. Crews are expecting strong wind gusts that could take the fire in unexpected directions. More than 460 people are working to take down this fire. More than 100 wild horses are headed for the sales corral. This week, BLM gathered the horses about 15 miles south of Glens Ferry. This removal is part of the BLM's management of excess wild horses. And Boise's first pro soccer league is delaying the debut of its women's soccer team to 2028. Club leaders say the delay is because of a scheduling change made by the league that it plays under. So the team was expected to debut next year, but the league announced they will be moving to a spring kickoff instead of fall. That would have accelerated the club's launch by about 6 months, and they weren't quite ready. And that's the 411 on the 208. A partnership across the border for a better trading future. Fresh off their trip from Canada, we caught up with Idaho ag leaders on why the relationship matters in this week's Inside Ag. How about our relationship? Text us at 208-321-5614. We'll share your comments and questions at the end of the show. The United States isn't ready to sign off on another 16 years of its trade deal with Canada and Mexico. But that doesn't mean the USMCA is dead or that trade has stopped. This agreement basically sets rules for how goods are moved between the United States, Canada, and Mexico, like reducing or eliminating tariffs on most products, setting standards for food safety and inspections, moving across the border, and having a process in place for resolving trade disputes. The current agreement remains in place while the three countries negotiate what may need to change. And for Idaho, those talks aren't just about policy. They're about the biggest international customers our farmers and ranchers have. For Inside Ag, we look at why Idaho leaders went north of the border before negotiations ever started. Leaders in beef, dairy, sugar, potatoes, and grains all headed up north.
Yeah, so we took a policy mission to Canada, went with about 30 Idahoans.
This 5-day trip was in Alberta, a province that in many ways looks, works, and grows a lot like Idaho. And it's driving Idaho ag. Canada is Idaho agriculture's #1 foreign market. In 2025, Canada bought more than $451.8 million in Idaho food and agricultural products. That's 31% of all Idaho agricultural exports. Mexico was second at 16%, and Japan third at 7%.
Canada remains a really critical partner for us.
And within Canada, Alberta is the center of that connection. It accounts for more than 48% of Canadian agri-food imports from Idaho, making Idaho the 4th largest state for imports to Alberta. And the biggest product moving north isn't the potato. It's actually cattle. Idaho exported more than 235,000 head of cattle to Canada during 2024 and 2025.
We're really good at raising cattle in Idaho. There are some access to feed and some things that they do really well in Alberta. So we'll feed cattle in Alberta, and then a lot of those cattle come back to the United States. So there's this partnership that happens that's worked really well.
A North American assembly line. And that system depends on cattle, feed, and money moving across the border without unnecessary delays. Which brings us to the USMCA. The trade agreement between the United States, Mexico, and Canada came up for its 6-year review this month. The United States chose not to simply extend it in its current form, but the agreement has not expired. It remains in effect while the countries discuss changes, including how existing rules are enforced.
And so we knew that timing this trip around that renegotiation or that discussion was going to be critically important, especially because we're talking to our #1 trading partner. And that what we saw is that ultimately we're not going to just sign on and agree to USMCA in its current form, and that the U.S. will pursue looking at some changes or amendments to what that structure looks like. But it's really important, again, to be on farm, to be with those folks in person, to talk about what this relationship looks like.
Now, Idaho doesn't get to negotiate the agreement. That's the federal government's job. But T-Walt says the state can make sure the federal negotiators understand what is and isn't working on the ground.
One of the things that a trip like this lets us do is to have those very specific commodity-based discussions. And those are, when you start at the ground up and you have those fundamentals, then you can build up to something that looks like an overall agreement or bigger discussions, but they're really important to have.
Sometimes that means working through issues most of us will never see. What counts as an approved feedlot, which animal health requirements apply, or what paperwork follows a load of cattle, potatoes, or seed across the border. And Idaho needs somewhere for all of that food to go. The state produces far more than our 2 million residents could ever eat. So while the future language of the USMCA may still be negotiated, Idaho is trying to protect the part that has already been working, the relationships.
You're more likely to do business with somebody you've met, somebody you trust, you've had some kind of relationship with. So that's important. But also, we specifically timed this trip to be around discussion of USMCA. We're not trade negotiators by any stretch. That is fully within the purview of the federal government. But we can work on partnerships, we can work on friendships, and what that looks like.
Now, as for trade talks, it could take time because the USMCA remains in effect. There's no immediate interruption to, again, Idaho exports, but the United States, Canada, and Mexico will continue reviewing the agreement. And if they still cannot reach an extension, they can revisit it each year until the deal's scheduled expiration in 2036. It's also important to note the USMCA isn't just about moving food across the border. You're talking about so much more, like automotives, airlines, among many, many other things. Just months away from the trip of a lifetime, we caught up with the director behind Honor Fight Boise.
I just didn't know how excited.
And all the plans for Idaho's veterans.
The stories that follow are phenomenal.
Are coming together.
Everything is being confirmed. So it's a good thing. I'm happy that all of the pieces are falling into place.
Well, we are less than 4 months out to Honor Flight Boise's first trip to Washington, D.C. The group is this month's 208 Way nonprofit. So far, you all have raised more than $5,500. That includes a $2,500 match from the Idaho Community Foundation. Honor Flight Boise will send about 20 veterans and their guardians to our nation's capital. There, they will be able to tour the monuments and places that honor the sacrifices that they made for our country. The nonprofit is about $20,000 short of its goal, but there is already demand for future flights. The group's director says the hope is to keep this momentum going for more trips.
And frankly, most surprised by the enthusiasm from the veterans and how grateful they are. Because so many of them say, oh, you know, I don't need to go. I didn't deserve it. I didn't do anything special. The things you typically hear. But when I get to talking to them about the flight, and especially the ones that have been notified that they're going, they are so excited and so grateful.
And Idaho is such a giving community, so if you want to donate, just scan that QR code on the bottom right-hand side of your screen, and you can also learn more about the 208 Way.
Well, heat and storms are weather words of the day. First to the heat. Current temperatures show triple digits widespread across the Treasure Valley right now. Boise actually cooling just a touch in response to some storms to the south. We've been as hot as 102 to 103 across the Boise area today. We're at a balmy 100 currently. But let's talk about the storm activity. This will impact folks, especially right now south of I-84. You can see we are starting to see some of this outflow gust front here from the storm over the Owyhee starting to trigger now some light rain over the foothills and the Boise Mountains. But this is the area I'm most concerned with. The orange polygon you see here, that is a severe thunderstorm warning. The storm right here, which right now, again, south of the I-84 corridor, heading for Hagerman and Wendell. You can see Buell off to the east. This storm is producing 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts. You can see abundant lightning in this storm and the one that is just south of Glens Ferry right now. This one not warned severe, but doesn't mean it won't be impactful. If you're in the path of these storms, which are moving from the southwest generally up to the northeast, you are urged to seek shelter. These are also producing some large hail, about quarter-inch hail. And so until the storm has passed, I would head indoors if at all possible. And you can see the lightning strikes outside of Glens Ferry. That is raising fire concerns today. Fire conditions remain critical. There is rain embedded within these storms, plenty of moisture coming in from the south. That's what's helping trigger the storm activity, but with very dry fuels out there and the heat from recent days, we are watching that storm or the fire activity very closely. So storms could continue to fire off, possibly strong to severe for the next several hours. We'll see most of that activity dying down after sunset. This particular model putting a little pocket of light rain over the lower Treasure Valley early tomorrow morning, but the bigger headline for tomorrow is another round of widespread storm activity, mostly outside of the Treasure Valley. We're watching those storms tomorrow for flash flood concerns up in the mountains. So that is something to be mindful of if you're camping or you live up in the higher elevations. We could see quick bursts of torrential rain, which could cause some flash flooding on steep terrain. Outside of the storms tomorrow, though, we'll see temperatures back off a little bit. Lots of sunshine, still very toasty, though, for the end of the work week. We'll wake up to upper 60s, right around 70. We likely will see a couple triple-digit readings across the Treasure Valley. It'll be hot regardless. Boise's at 99 tomorrow with that slight chance of some storms in the afternoon. We stay dry, sunny, and blazing hot over the weekend, and that's the headline into next week, though storm and rain chances do return for some areas on Monday. It is 5:22. A quick check of traffic conditions out there right now. We are seeing some slow and go conditions in some spots, especially along I-84, of course, the Flying Y, and then off and on as you get out into Nampa. Quick check of that current traffic flow does show it looking pretty typical out there for this point in the evening. It's about a 35-minute drive right now to get from the Flying Y out to the Caldwell area, and so just expect it to take a little bit longer so far as you're getting home on your Thursday evening.
Before we get to your viewer comments, we are putting the call out again for what word you use to identify where you're from. People from Idaho called Idahoans, people from Boise, Boiseans. The past couple weeks, we've asked you what people from Nampa and Meridian are called. Nampans, Nampons, Meridianites, I don't even know how to say that one. You all had a lot of great ideas, and now we want to know what people from Garden City are called. So text us your clever ideas and the not so clever ones too at 208-321-5614, and we'll share them tomorrow here on the 208. You'll also get the official answer from the mayor of Garden City. Don't miss tomorrow's 208. All right, let's take a look at some of your comments. First one, Scott, are seniors going to be penalized for riding an electric bike on the Greenbelt? Well, if you mean scooters, 300 watts going more than 15 miles per hour, titled and insured, yes. But if they're not that fast, they go slower, you'll be fine. It just depends. What are you riding? Then we also have Sam who says, way to go, Garden City, celebrating that fact.